Hi everyone, I am Shakina, the neurodisruptor, formerly known as Halima Al-Hatimy, and I'm back again with another video here on Politics and Prophecy with Shakina. This video is talking specifically about 5 reasons why I feel unsafe coexisting with Muslims here in Canada. So, the first reason why I feel unsafe coexisting with them is that this group of people has way too much protection. For those who don't know, in 2015, I founded a nonprofit organization called FemCare Community Health Initiative. In 2017, I started consulting the municipal, provincial, and federal government on the issue of period poverty and the need for them to look at this crisis on a systemic level. When I approached Minister Maryam Monsef, who was the Minister of Status of Women at the time, to talk to her about the issue of period poverty, I told her about my own personal story, experiencing gender-based violence based on my menstruation. I told her the story of when I was 15 years old, how I was abducted by my Muslim father to the Republic of Kenya, where I was held in confinement by my Muslim aunt, uncle, and grandmother. Their plan was to starve me to death. I managed to organize with the Canadian government to organize my escape back to Canada. But while I was there, I was nearly sold off as a child bride to a 33-year-old man. My mother rescued me from the situation with my aunt, uncle, and grandmother and took me into my maternal grandmother's home. But my maternal grandmother was experiencing severe poverty and was also very abusive and violent towards me. And she came up with the idea to marry me off to a 33-year-old man named Abu Bakr. This is common practice within Muslim communities all over the world to groom their daughters and sons, but especially daughters at a very young age, to prepare for marriage as soon as they reach early adulthood. And I, unfortunately, was almost not even going to make it to early adulthood before my family funneled me into what I call the Islamic marriage industrial complex. Okay, when I told Maryam Monsef about this story, she promised me that she would help me find a way to tell my story. Not only did this Muslim member of parliament abjectly fail to do that, she took my knowledge and expertise in the menstrual industry and sat down with the Liberal Party to figure out how to put this menstrual policy in place while eliminating me. Because by eliminating me, then the rest of the country would not have to hear my story. And by the country not hearing my story, they will not have to take a closer look at how Muslims use marriage to abuse their children, especially their daughters. So they went ahead and they passed a motion to distribute menstrual products at no cost in all federally regulated washrooms, even though that's not what I asked for. This is just one way in which we have allowed Muslims to bring Sharia law into our political arena and into Canadian government to then hide the atrocities that Canadians like me have been subjected to at the hands of this evil, demonic cult of a religion. The second reason why I feel unsafe living amongst Muslims is because of child marriage. As I have said, these communities start at a very young age to groom their children, especially their daughters, to be married in early adulthood. Okay? You have countries like in the Republic of Iran that have legislated to allow young girls to be married as early as 13 years old. some of these girls are actually getting married even older to men who are, even younger, to men who are significantly older than them. What I find the most disturbing about this is I do not see many Muslim groups here in the Western world, if any at all, advocating against legislated child marriage in the Republic of Iran. However, they are constantly bashing Jewish Israel, when in fact it is Palestinians that are terrorizing the Jews, not Israelis occupying Palestine. Muslims are aware that child marriage is practiced within the community. They are aware that their prophet also married a child bride and groomed her for marriage at a very, very early age, as early as 6 years old. And they continue to make up excuses to justify this pedophilic behavior. In addition to that, there were Muslims here in Hamilton, Ontario, who were aware that my father was abducting me and my mother to the Republic of Kenya with intentions to marry me off, and they kept their mouths shut. In fact, some of the women deliberately stayed silent about it because they were jealous of my intelligence. I was always a gifted child, and I was always extremely intelligent and far wiser and more mature than my age. And part of that had to do with the fact that I was severely abused by my Muslim father growing up, and I was forced to grow up quickly. Well, this made me, my coping mechanism, apparently, unbeknownst to me, would make me a target to jealous Muslim women who could literally, or are old enough to be my mother. These women actually knew that my father was sending me off to get married, and they relished in the idea of me not getting to finish my education and instead getting married, because it made them feel better about their inadequacy and the fact that they were significantly less intelligent than I am. Reason number 3 that I feel unsafe living among Muslims is the Arabization of Islam, and particularly the white Arabization of Islam. I need to make very clear that the original Arabs were Yemenite Jews. They were actually Afro-Arabs. The original Arabs were black. These pale-skinned white Arabs that just showed up out of nowhere, this came far later on during the establishment of the Ottoman Empire. They weren't here before. It was actually black people, Afro-Arabs, who were the original Arabs. But then you have now pale-skinned white Arabs who are claiming that they are the original Arabs. And what's happened is they've actually created a form of white supremacy within their Islamic ecosystem. And now anti-blackness pervades all over the Muslim world. What is even worse is that there is a history of the trans-Arabic slave trade where white Arabs systematically captured, exploited, enslaved, and even sold black people as slaves. Not to mention that they were the ones who helped Europeans organize the transatlantic slave trade by giving them tips on how to manage black slaves and ensure that they cannot escape. Okay, so actually the history of anti-blackness started with white Arabs. It didn't start with Europeans. And what scares me the most, though, is that white Europeans are being held accountable for their history of egregious forms of white supremacy and racism. However, white Arabs are not. What is even worse is white Arabs come to the Western world and they claim that they are victims of hate. Like, for example, Mohammed Faqih, a white Arab owner of Paramount Fine Foods. But if you go look at his restaurant, which by the way, I have been going to his restaurant for over 10 years now. Over 10 years, for several years now. I have never seen a black employee working at his restaurant. And yet he has the audacity to make a national spectacle of Kevin L. Johnston, claiming that he has been subjected to hate speech and hate violence. Maybe some of the things that Kevin Johnston did was a bit ludicrous, and I wouldn't back up some of his behavior, but I abjectly refuse to believe that Kevin L. Johnston is hateful. I think some of the things that he's calling for, particularly for Muslims to be closely monitored, are completely justified. And I have my own personal lived experiences as to why I believe that Kevin L. Johnston is justified for advocating for Muslims to be more heavily regulated and monitored by government intelligence services. The other reason why I feel unsafe living amongst Muslims is that they like to make things politically, they like to make things up as they go in order to suit them politically. So they will change around the tenets of their religion. They will manipulate some of the clauses in their religion or some of the things that are allowed. Like, for example, there's actually nothing more pathetic than listening to a Muslim try to justify the marriage between child bride Aisha and their prophet Muhammad. There's actually nothing more embarrassing than that. There's actually also very few things that are more hilarious than listening to Muslims talk about the second coming of Jesus Christ. And how apparently he's going to fight the Antichrist alongside Muslims when Muslims are actually plagued by the spirit of the Antichrist. I find that actually quite hilarious, especially given that Muslims have bastardized the image of Jesus by denying him as the Son of God and reducing him to merely a prophet, and actually placing a demonic pedophile like the Prophet Muhammad above Jesus Christ. So what I find extra disturbing too is the way they gaslight people when you try to talk about the religion and some of the things, the atrocities that are legislated in the religion, the way they gaslight people and the way they like to play victim narcissists, which is actually extremely dangerous. So essentially what victim narcissists are is they're the ones who go out and they're participating in systems of oppression, but because they do not want to take accountability for the ways in which they participate in systems of oppression, they then sit back and claim that they are victims, like the way Muhammad Faqih claimed he was a victim of hate crime, or how Muslims claim that they're victims of Islamophobia. I don't understand how Muslims can be victims of Islamophobia when you consider that Islam is not even a legitimate religion, because Islam is actually a bastardized, colonized version of Judeo-Christian law and Arab paganism. Lastly, but not least, and there's several other reasons why I feel unsafe living among Muslims here in Canada, but for the sake of this video, this will be the last one, is that Muslims are colonizers and blasphemers. So they don't actually believe in God, right? They are being managed by religion that was pioneered by a narcissistic, violent, pedophile, rapist, womanizer. And I would even argue a sociopath and war criminal. And that is who pioneered their religion, and this is who they faithfully follow, to the point that they will justify nasty, conduct like pedophilia and rape and war crime, because this is who they follow. The other thing that's really disturbing is about Muslims particularly and their blasphemy is that they claim that they believe in Jesus, but nothing could be further from the truth. They claim that they're an Abrahamic religion, but again, this is also very dangerous because this is false advertising. They're not an Abrahamic religion. God never delivered Islam to the masses. Jesus made it very clear that he came to clarify Jewish law. He made it very clear that he did die on the cross. There's documented evidence that this happened. There's also documented evidence that he was resurrected. That's right. There's no evidence that Muhammad was divinely inspired, but there's tons of evidence to show that Muhammad is a narcissist who saw opportunity in colonizing Jewish law, and he did just that. My question for Muslims is, if you are following God, if you are following the right religion, if your religion is divinely inspired, why do you need to depend on cockroaches like Justin Trudeau to protect you? See, I'm not depending on any secular government, but I just find it funny how Muslims depend on secular governments, to the point where Justin Trudeau poured millions of dollars into the National Islamophobia Summit this year before the election, which he loves to do before any federal election, right? The liberals love to do that, to push this Islamophobia narrative. But my question to you is, if Islamophobia is real, why do you need the government of Canada to advocate and protect you? Where's Muhammad to advocate and protect you? Where's the law that Muhammad left behind to protect you? See, I'm depending on Jesus Christ. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm supernaturally protected. I'm literally at war with all the major institutions in the world, with leaders in the Islamic, in the mosque, leaders in the church, government officials here in Canada on all three levels. I'm at war with government officials in England, okay? I have conflict with organizations all over the world, major organizations, major institutions. And guess what? I have never run to a single secular government official and asked them to protect me. It was Jesus the entire time. And yes, Jesus has protected me through government officials, but it wasn't the government officials that I depended on. It was Jesus that sent them to help me. I didn't go to these government officials asking them for help. It was Jesus that sent them to me. What I want to know about you Muslims is if what you believe is true, if your religion is so divinely inspired. And remember, I used to be Muslim too, but thank God Jesus saved me from that hellhole. If what you believe in is actually true, then why do you need to run around like this? Why do you need the government to spend millions of dollars to save you from Islamophobia? Why isn't God protecting you? That's right, because God is Jesus Christ. And you have bastardized God, because you're blasphemers. And that's why you can't rely on supernatural protection. And that's why you're going to spend the last few months that you have right now before the rapture happens to run behind the government of Canada, all right, and run around behind punks like Justin Trudeau thinking they're going to save you. But they're not going to save you from the wrath of God. And you will be held accountable for the ways in which you continue to promote the bastardization of Jesus's image and Jewish law, okay? Islam is not a legitimate religion. And the fact that it's being made to be a legitimate religion and that this violence and their terrorism is being framed as religion, okay? And they're even being protected by movements such as anti-Islamophobia movements, okay? This frightens me. It frightens me when people who are responsible for so much violence, when people who are responsible for defending nastiness ad nauseum with no shame, they sit there and they vehemently defend things like polygamy and sit there and defend things like child marriage and things like violence and colonizing. They sit there and they defend it publicly with no shame. And they get protection from the government. That's something that we should all be afraid of. And we should all be worried about the trajectory in which Muslims and the people who support them are trying to take us here in the Western world.